Welcome to the Virginia Startup Podcast. I'm Lisa Calhoun, the founding managing partner of Valor Ventures, and we are a seed lead investor active across the South and really interested in core states like Virginia. The purpose of this podcast is to make sure the Virginia startup community is really connected with Valor resources and also some of the resources right in Virginia that are ready to support the next great global company. So today's guest is really special, someone with a long career in innovation and economic development. I'm really excited to have Paula Sorrell from George Mason University, where she's the Associate Vice President of Innovation and Economic Development. Welcome to the program, Paula.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here, Lisa.
I'm so excited you're here too. Well, a lot of universities don't have innovation or economic development programs. And I know you actually have a career in it, even before George Mason, doing very similar work at University of Michigan. Could you share a little bit more about why a university invests in innovation?
Sure. So I would say that the first half of my career was in startups, and I did 7, and 6 of them sold. Some of them I was with them when they sold, some sold later. Sometimes they had a little equity, sometimes they had a lot of equity. But it was a fun ride. And then I got interested I went into state government to run innovation, entrepreneurship, and venture capital for the state of Michigan during the Great Recession, because who doesn't like a challenge? And it was to create a bunch of programs. And there was a lot of learning in that, a lot of lessons learned about what levers to pull, what things work, what doesn't work, what works short term, what things should be around forever or sort of forever. And then I went into the University of Michigan, the belly of the beast, which is, Michigan is the largest research university in the country. It gets over 1.85 billion, I think now, in federal research. And so it was a great playground to teach. I got to teach entrepreneurship. I got to teach technology commercialization and engineering, which was really fun. Loved working with the students, but also I got to create programs where we worked with companies from the outside and train people to work with them. And I wasn't really looking for a job, and I was actually hired by Virginia to give some advice on how to make investments in higher ed that would result in more technologies out the door, more companies stood up. And that led to a conversation with George Mason. And I was fascinated that basically almost all the programs that support entrepreneurs, federal programs, landed at Mason, maybe because of its proximity to DC. I'm not really sure why. And the fact that really I had barely heard of George Mason University, and it's the largest university in Virginia with 40,000 students.
Wow, I did not
So
know it was the largest. If I would have guessed, I would have guessed wrong at University of Virginia or something like that.
yeah, it's only 50 years old. So working at a large, longstanding, very successful university was great. I would say doing new things it takes a little bit longer because you're challenging the status quo of, we've always been great at this, so why should we change it? And, it takes a lot of convincing. At Mason, I found that the culture is more of like, sure, we'll try anything. What do you want to do?
Wow.
And people will always say, how can I help? I mean, they don't always have the bandwidth to help. In fact, they usually don't, but they at least are good intentioned. And
Very Southern as well, just like yeah, yes, and yeah.
they do, yeah, very, very true. And I wasn't sure, I had worked also in Miami and Atlanta for a while, um, but mostly in Michigan, and I wasn't sure how it was going to be for a Midwesterner going into this region. But I found that surprisingly, I don't know why I was surprised. I shouldn't be surprised, but they were very open to outside people coming in, and everybody's very welcoming, and they just figure out kind of where you fit and how you can help and how to collaborate. And I couldn't be happier with the way
Big
things turned
cities
out.
in the South actually have more diversity than the Northeast and the Midwest. So
True.
it's kind of interesting. But when you look at melting pots like Houston, New Orleans, Atlanta, Miami, DC, people have learned to embrace inclusion as in business in the last really 50 years. And it's changed the culture in such a positive way. But I digress. Let's get back to George Mason and your work there. I have to bring up a little bit of I'm just going to bring up a challenging point. One of the challenging points I often encounter is that VC media, which of course is West Coast based, where a large majority of investments are made, they like to represent that entrepreneurship and innovation is inherent and you cannot support it, create it. You've either got it or you don't. What have you learned in your career around entrepreneurship? Is it something that's purely inherent, or can that fire be stoked?
Are you asking me the nature and nurture question?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But, every entrepreneur that's interested in venture capital, my world,
Mhm.
they read TechCrunch, and sometimes I wish they didn't. Not that TechCrunch is bad, it's not. It's just you
Mhm.
have to understand what it's good at. And what it's good at is reporting out of San Francisco for the most part. And that's not the rest of the world where most founders actually come from. 40% of the US population is in the South. Guess what? That's about how many entrepreneurs we have, 40% of them. So TechCrunch doesn't really speak to a large segment of entrepreneurs in the country.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a combination of both. I think there are certain things that can be taught, and you've got to have the hustle, and you've got to want to have the hustle. Very few founders go into business, I think, really wanting to get wealthy. I think they do it because they have a passion for something, and maybe the idea of doing this thing and doing it in a bigger way is really what drives them. And you've got to have a little bit of it in you too. I started my first business in my dorm room at college because I couldn't afford college. I was a first generation college student. And so I ran a business out of my dorm room, and
We
I
have
look
that in common. I just have to say it's always so
really.
good to have a conversation with you. But my mom gave me a fax machine for my birthday when I was in college on scholarship so that I could make money. And I ran a small business out of my dorm room because I could make more money doing that than I'm sure as you working in the cafeteria or other things I was qualified for. But anyway, that's really fun. So I have to ask, what kind of business were you running out of that dorm room?
I had been fortunate to go to Catholic schools in Detroit. And the nuns thought I would make an excellent secretary someday. So I was really good at spelling, grammar, sentence structure, and typing. And so I used to edit and type term papers for people.
And that was when you were at Harvard?
No, no, that was at Central Michigan University. I went to the cheapest state university there was.
It was the start. Yes.
It was the
Okay.
start. It was the very
Awesome.
start.
That's a great story. So you have to have the hustle. That's inherent. That's a little bit nature, you would say.
Yeah.
What are some of
And
the things that you've seen can be developed through programs? Because I know you're known for starting quite a few. Just before we got on this podcast recording, you were telling me you start like 4 a year, which is incredible productivity.
yeah, well, it's to build an ecosystem because not every entrepreneur starts at the same point and not everyone is headed to the same point. We try to meet people where they are and get them to their next point as fast as we can. And you need a variety of programs to be able to do that. Everybody needs something a little bit different. So in addition to, I mean, not just starting programs, but I also counseled probably more than 1,000 businesses in my career so far. My husband does the same thing. So he also counsels businesses. He used to be an attorney in Silicon Valley. And we bounce ideas off of each other all the time. But in counseling companies, I would say um, they almost always, the two skill sets. So usually you're working with a brilliant technical founder. And the two skill sets that they usually need, which is just things that they didn't train for, are finance and marketing. Almost all the time, those are of the two things they need. That's where the starting point is, and helping them understand. And for a first time entrepreneur, they don't know what they don't know. So you're trying to bring them to the table, make connections for them, make introductions for them, give them some strategic guidance on where they need to go. And we really don't want them to talk to a funder until they're ready. I mean, there's only one chance to make a first impression. And it's not necessarily like right when you need money. It's just when you're ready to talk about what you do and you're able to say, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to come back to you in 6 months, 9 months, whatever. And I'm going to ask you for money at that time. But in the meantime, watch me. Or here's my strategy that I'm setting out, and here are my milestones that I tend to achieve. I love the counseling businesses. I love hearing the entrepreneur stories. I love the problem solving part of it and helping them figure out, what's coming next. And the more resources we can put around that. And I would say right now, I don't get to have as much fun as I would like to, because I'm, overseeing programs. I have a team of more than 100 counselors that help businesses of every type. So we help
Wow.
women start daycare centers, which, by the way, is a huge drag on the economy right now, not having enough childcare. So we're trying to help the economy in that end, and then all the way through to tech companies. And by the way, more than 60% of our clients are women-owned businesses.
Wow, have to love that stat. I actually, since US women brought home 65% of the Olympic medals, I tend to think when women go to win, we tend to over compete and do a great job. So I'm sure those are some very stunning founders. Now, when it comes to venture funding, I just have to double click on something you said. It's something to prepare for, but
Mhm.
it's a learnable skill.
Yeah.
So, I myself, as one of the first women to launch an institutional venture capital firm 3 funds ago, I had a lot to learn as well about venture capital and found some of those educational resources, for example, Kauffman Fellows Program.
Mhm.
But venture as a journey for the founder, it appears like it's relatively simple because in a way we're usually fairly familiar with loan terms. Maybe someone got a mortgage or they did a lease application and they think, I'll fill in the blanks and this will all work out.
Mhm.
But when it comes to getting venture financing, there's a whole process and culture around it that is quite opaque but learnable through programs. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to bring our kind of entry-level funding program to Virginia. Startup Runway is running its first cohort on September 17th in Richmond. And so what Startup Runway does is it provides grant checks. These are completely non-dilutive grant checks supported by our sponsors, in this case, the National Science Foundation and Virginia Invests. And we're certainly looking for more sponsors in Virginia, but we introduce chosen select high potential pre-seed startups. Usually they don't have revenue yet, to investors in mentor sessions where they get to present problems and get mentor feedback from those investors and work that into how they even frame the opportunity of their company, because the way they're thinking about the opportunity may not be the way a long-term investor would, and that's okay. That doesn't mean it's opposition, but the founder does have to sort of marry those goals, and that can certainly be learned.
Yeah, that's one thing that's important for founders to understand too, is that how you take the feedback and whether you take the feedback, it's basically there's a box that we look for when and we're providing no cost counseling. We're not VCs, but we have a good track record of the companies we work with have a really great track record of getting funding. But almost the first checkbox we look for is coachable or uncoachable. And coachable means willing to take advice, willing to fix those things that need to be fixed so that, we're not doing it because it's fun to say, like, here are the holes in your business. We're doing it because, the thing that we get valued on from all of our government funders and support system are how well the companies do that we support. So it's not about us. It's about, do the companies go on to access angel investment, venture capital? Do they get bank lines of credit? Do they hire people? Do they establish? Do they expand the company? Do they have a good exit? Or do they partner with somebody else? So do they get strategic investment? All of those things are considered wins, and so we're kind of the biggest cheerleader for any startups in Virginia.
How do Virginia startups, how many do you touch in a year through this program?
So multiple programs. Again, our total portfolio of companies is 30,000 small businesses, and that's through multiple programs. Some of them have been around for 20 years. If I look at just the tech sector of businesses, I would say we're closing in on the 1,600 company range, in terms
Wow.
of tech startups. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And so when you look at your tech startups, do you have a figure? And I don't mean to put you on the spot if you don't have it off the top of your head, you don't, but how much funding the tech startups as a collective group have been able to attract?
We do. We do. When we look at just, for example, the ICAP mentor program, it was a program that was created to catch up with 20 other states that had a similar program. It's basically the tech team that's on a small business development center, or SBDC. And they provided no cost counseling. So in 2.5 years, those companies went on to get over $200 million in follow-on funding. If we
Wow.
look at, yeah, if we look at like our Accelerate Investor event, which we'll talk about later, but the companies that have pitched we've done that for 3 years now, started small, built up bigger. Those companies have raised so far $47 million in follow-on funding. So
Big numbers, big impacts.
big numbers, and sometimes they're small checks and sometimes they're big checks, and it depends on what the company needs, and like I said, we'll try to get them what they need to look good. And you and I were talking before about one thing that they need to look good is they need to the biggest check mark they can have. Obviously, you as a funder, you look at the entrepreneur, and are they a good entrepreneur? Are they capable? Do they do they instill confidence? But also, where are they willing to convince somebody to buy? And one of the things that somebody says, I hear this a lot about my track record with startups was, how did you pick so many good startups? And I say, well, I looked at if the technical founder was able to convince a customer to buy, I knew I would be able to as well.
Absolutely. Customer diligence, even though we're a seed lead investor. And, I was just sharing with you, don't mind sharing with our audience that, Valor just extended another term sheet. Thank goodness we do that, once a month, and we try for twice a month. But in
Right.
any event, the company had 50K in actual revenue in the last year, and they have contracts into 150K, which are signed, and that's happening. But that's a very young company.
Yeah.
That's the type of we've certainly backed companies with more revenue than that, including up into and almost over 1 million. But the truth is, as a seed lead, our sweet spot is that early scale. But we still ask customers why they're buying. Why did they choose this relatively unproven solution? And honestly, their answer means so much about how we can project if that market is a real scalable market at venture scale. Not will the business survive, but will it survive to deliver 5, 6, 30x returns to those first investors? So, such an important point. Can you get that sales and marketing motion early? I mean, if we can get it to a certain scale, then we're going to be able to hire professionals to run it for you. But you have to get there first.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things this was actually something that I learned in Michigan, but it's been a helpful tool for us in walking companies through how to get from here to there as a technology roadmap, which is thinking through the finance elements. How much money are you going to need when? What people are you going to have to hire and when, over a timeline? And who will your customers be and when? And that's the toughest part to map out.
It is, especially for the first time founder. And honestly, that's where advice from counselors who've been there, done that, seen the journeys of 1,600 tech companies can really provide some boundaries. Like, yeah, this is kind of, these are where the ditch sides might be. And now you can choose your path in between. But that combination of passion from the entrepreneur, but lack of experience, of course, and experience from counselors, that sounds like a win. Tell me how a startup applies, or what does the criteria application process look like?
So that's a great question. We have a no wrong door approach. So while we're a team of, in total, 200 people, We make sure that whoever you talk to first under the Mason Enterprise umbrella is going to get you where you need to go with the fewest number of hops. I mean, we literally do exercises with a ball of yarn, saying this is what the company needs next. This is where they go next, so that we can make sure that we're being as efficient as possible. So it doesn't matter. You can come in through the Small Business Development Center or the ICAP. You can come in through the Apex Accelerator, which is DoD. You can come to one of our Mason Enterprise Centers, which are incubators. We operate 5 of those in Northern Virginia. We'll get you to where you need to be. I mentioned that we work in every county of Virginia. We have clients everywhere. We also work with the local partners on the ground. So, the local partners in Richmond and Roanoke and Blacksburg and Charlottesville, we really enjoy kind of those handoffs where we're filling a gap, but not duplicating effort.
How does this sort of program complement the George Mason University experience? Because it sounds like a major give back and it's a very good thing. And I'm just curious about the university side of it.
Oh, that's a great question. The president of the university has an initiative he calls the Mason Virginia Promise, which is that any Virginian can get a pathway toward a degree or to the support to starting a business. And we're the second part of that Mason Virginia Promise. We offer more than 900 training programs on every topic, like how to start a business, how to set up your QuickBooks for the first time, but also how to be cyber secure, how to get your next, your government contract or whatever it is that you're headed to. We hold a workshop on it, and we usually partner with the professional community as well, attorneys, accountants, banks. Some of the content we offer ourselves, but regardless, 98% of the programs we offer are no cost. So it doesn't matter if you're a student, if you're a faculty member, or just a business in Virginia, you can attend, and more than 70% of those programs are online. So it makes it easy to join.
Right. You don't have to travel. You don't have to have parking fees. You don't have to, your kids can be in the room if you need them to be.
All the
It's
things.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, if you could wave a wand, and I'm going to time limit you so that it's a little more immediate, and change something in the next year for Virginia founders,
Mhm.
what would you change? What would you lean on? And just if you were basically omnipotent, what's something that you would love to see change?
Oh my gosh. I think that we have such potential in Virginia, such untapped potential. I'd like to see I'd like to see larger universities. So our largest research university is ranked 48th in the country right now. We are bookended on either state by top 10 institutions in other states. And I think that we have a lot of potential to grow. More research equals more startups ultimately, which is more of a feeder for people like you and me whose job is to make sure that they go faster. And then I think we need to continue on an evolution of building startups. We need to continue to pull those levers. One of the biggest needs, we went through, gap analysis for Northern Virginia, but we think about it in terms of what gaps can we help fill? What are others filling? Who do we partner with? We have those conversations all the time. Helping companies get customers for the first time is a really big one. The mentorship piece has not been figured out, so there's not a consistent way to fund the mentors that helped. The ROI on that is like, for a $1 million a year program that helped companies get, over 200 million. That's quite a significant ROI. It's worth the investment, and we need to be long-term and consistent. I belong to a national organization, a few national organizations, like everybody does.
Sure.
But there are a group of us that are practitioners that are kind of in the same space. Not all of us most don't work for universities, but some do. And we talk all the time about what's important to keep going. What are the biggest challenges that we all face nationally? And the things that they talk about is consistent funding to the ecosystem is really important. Organizations that are the glue. So an organization like mine is illustrious as it sounds. We're a glue organization, and glue is hard to fund. People like to fund new shiny objects, and really the important thing is to double down on what you know is working and do more of that.
Are you
Um,
familiar with how much of the George Mason Foundation is invested in early stage?
yeah, so George Mason, being only a 50-year-old institution, fortunately, most of our alumni are still alive, the vast
That's
majority of them.
right.
And because it grew so quickly, also most of our alumni are very young. So we're the only university that doesn't have a significant endowment. Um,
Interesting
right,
things to think about in the future. But
right.
one of the pieces of feedback I get the opportunity to speak with a number of endowments, and we have some endowments among our LP base, thankfully. Those endowments that choose to invest and accelerate their communities, whatever, whether they define those regionally, locally, there's a lot of variety there. There is a true loop of beneficial reward in those situations. And of course, it's very high risk because often they're going, if not first, among the first. But it's something, of course, I really encourage because of you're
Yeah.
right there. You've got an unfair advantage in your local technology community that you actually are building. And the feedback loop of those successes is enriching, not just financially, but on so many levels for all involved. So it's an opportunity that might be a program for in the
Yeah,
future.
no, you're right. You're right. And my board wants to do a fund. So they're supportive in that way. We joke that there's never a right time to do a fund. So we talk about like when
These
will
are
that
true
not
words,
right time
Paul. Let
be?
me tell you. I mean, as a practice, there are no good times to start.
Right.
But
And and the
you
GMO
know,
Foundation is very supportive. So I actually have a fundraiser assigned to me that helps raise funds for entrepreneur programs. So they're extremely supportive and wonderful partners. And then the GMU Instructional Foundation actually does invest, and they do some investments in startups, and they actually help seed some of my programs as well to get them going and help us think creatively about how we operate.
that's exciting. That's a really exciting kernel, and I hope it continues to develop rapidly.
Yeah.
Um, when it comes to the economic development relationship between startups and the local community, call it North Virginia or all of Virginia, have you noticed a correlation between like good job growth, tech job growth, and startup success?
Yes, and I used to, so part of the work I did at U of M was I was also a researcher and led a team of researchers where we looked at best practices in economic development. And it's usually about 10 years before you start, 8 to 10 years before you start to see that significant job growth. I mean, we're talking about a knowledge economy, and what is the so an educated knowledge-based economy, what's the opposite of that? I think we want to have an educated knowledge-based economy. Those jobs are typically higher paying, so they're usually twice what a typical economic development play is in terms of the jobs that get created, but it's a lagging number. So, if you make in economic development, if you make an investment in a factory, I come from a land of factories, you're going to see, the factory opens the door, they hire a bunch of jobs. In tech development, it's a
But you
slower
also
growth.
have to build the factory a lot of times. And so when you're looking at the sunk cost and the ROI, it can take longer. One of the things I like about early stage venture capital is when Valor writes, say, $1 million check, you can be assured that that's going into at least 10 well-paying tech jobs that year.
Well, that's the
And
first thing they need, right? That's the reason they
exactly.
raise money. The startups need people, and that's why they need the additional capital.
Absolutely. I mean, that's usually exactly it. And they need developers. And while not everyone will be hired locally, there's definitely still, even in this, global local environment, the core team tends to be hired around the CEO who raised the capital. The highest paying jobs generally stay in that environment. And so It's a big economic development opportunity. The early stages, which interestingly enough, they're the riskier ones. And of course, it's so much easier to think about real estate or land development and multiple use. But in this economy and our future economy, the way I see it, there's so much opportunity in Virginia and across the South to look at the impact of local venture capital at the earliest stages for
Agree.
economic development as well as returns.
Agree. And there's also a good there's also good research that shows that there's a track record of, usually people don't exit a company successfully and then move to an island. They usually stay in their region and they reinvest in their community, and they either decide to start another company or start investing in companies or support the ecosystem in some other way through volunteerism, through coaching and advising and providing guidance. Maybe some of them start funds, and everybody takes a different tack. I went the education route, although I consider myself to be a capitalist first, an economic developer second, and an educator third, I guess in that order. But
Well,
there's
the impact you're having across literally almost 2,000 now tech startups in your state is amazing. Honestly, I don't think I know of a single person that can claim that kind of a contrail in startups from one position. You have so much to be proud of, and George Mason as well.
Well, I think the point is it's not a single person. I mean, I have an incredible team of people, a core of 40, and then the 200 extended team. And none of this could be done without partners at the state that have trusted us, our federal partners. The counties in Northern Virginia have been amazing supporters and critical strategic partners for us too, in thinking through how we do things. So it's not, I don't want it to sound ever like it's a person. It's a team of people.
Absolutely. I know, for example, I mean, Valor, a lot of our team is headquartered in Atlanta, but we would be not nearly so far with so many wonderful founder conversations in Virginia without people on the ground. For example, our venture partner, Craig Snodgrass in Midlothian, Virginia. I have never been. I will, I'm sure, go someday, but he has an incredible startup background and helps take a company to public markets, IPO as well in his last position. But his input, his coffees, chats,
Oh,
lunches,
love
meetings.
the VVP coffees. I mean, they do they're such good partners and a good team. If I need, you know, if I need somebody to screen something, if I need investors to show up to something, they are always there for us, and they give good advice along the way. So they do the hard work.
They do a lot of work. It is an incredible team. Could not agree more. So I'm curious about some of your top, most distinguished, most successful, I don't know how you would call it, programs. Are there one or two that you'd love to highlight and make sure that startups and founders listening to us, if they don't already know, that they put these on their radar?
Yeah, so ICAP, of course, is important, part of the SBDC. We're working on beefing up the resources so that we can support more companies under that program, but it has huge opportunity, and I've seen it work in so many states with such a high ROI. It's kind of a
So
great.
the startup would go to the Small Business Development Council. Is that kind of one of the doors?
Yeah, Small Business Development Center. That's a door, but it doesn't matter. We'll get you where you need to go. We are excited that our partnership across the Mid-South, so we're a member of the Mid-South Hub, where we provide support to faculty members under NSF I-Corps. We also have an ICAP Lean Startup program where we put companies through, and a lot of the accelerators around the state have plugged ICAP into the middle of their accelerator to provide specifically that type of resource and mentorship. I love that program. I love all our programs. I mean, because of where we are, we run the Apex Accelerator for Virginia. I'm pretty sure that we're the largest one in the country. It's government contracting, and while we have a huge economic splash, over $3 billion of our impact last year to small businesses was in government contracting. It's,
Wow.
you know,
Tell me more about that. So in connecting startups, small businesses with government contract opportunities.
yes, yes, startups and small businesses. We have a fantastic team of counselors, but also we put on a lot of programs too, and we do a lot of meet and greets with government contractors as well, so that you can understand what they need. I have a team that's very detailed in helping people make sure that they're putting in good applications. And so I mean, that's how you get a $3 billion in 1 year impact.
What are some of give me a sense of the range of government contracts available in a year?
Oh, it's anything from janitorial to drone parts to, to software. It's
Awesome.
um it's unlimited. And we sometimes refer to the federal government as the world's largest customer, and we're right next door to the world's largest customer, so why not embrace it?
Absolutely. No, it's a huge opportunity. It should be embraced. And so 3 billion of impact from that program, did you say?
Yes, yes, I
That's
know. That comes from DoD. They're the data collector for federal government contracts, and they give that number to us.
fantastic.
Yes.
I was also super curious to learn more about your investor conference. You were saying it's 4 years old. Maybe you could tell me a little bit more about why you started it, kind of the goals behind Accelerate.
Oh my gosh. Well, I started this job during COVID. I accepted it before COVID started it right after. And so I had 6 months from a chair in another state to try to figure out what to do. So I interviewed more than 100 people in the ecosystem and around the state and said, what do you think the ecosystem needs? And what role do you think Mason should play in the ecosystem? And everyone was circling around, we need to convene for investors. We need to bring in investors from outside. Well, a friend and I, prior to this, we were actually co-managing directors of an organization. She was the first employee, and it's Clean Tech Group in San Francisco. And we used to do investor events around the world. So we'd bring in big investors. It'd be like a 1,200 person event on Nob Hill, 300 people in Boston or New York, and then we did Western Europe and Asia. And then we burned out and we both went and did other things. But coming here, I said, hey, what do you think? Should we try this here? And she said, sure, I'm game. So the
Getting
first year,
covered enough.
yeah, yeah, the first year we had it was a Hail Mary pass. We were the week before, we're like, oh, it's still kind of COVID. Do we even do this? We had 300 people show up. Some were still masked. The next year we had 400. Last year we had almost 500 people. We brought in 66 investors from 10 states. We showcased 44 companies last year. We had screened through more than 100 companies to get to those 44. And a generous donor had said, hey, I'd really like a student competition on this. Can we add a student element to it? And we said, well, sure, we don't sleep, so we might as well add a student competition. So we opened it up to, critical mass helps drive investors in. So we said, okay, any student or company in DC, Maryland, or Virginia, you are welcome to come. We know from doing this event over, a decade, she's been at it for 20 years. I've been at it for 10. Just in the investor event segment, we know we have to hold it close to a major airport. We know that, NV, the National Venture Capital Association is not that far away. We have lots of reasons that we can draw them in. So we hold it in Arlington for that reason. So we can get the investors this far. We're just saying, come on, Virginia, come on, companies, just come, apply to pitch, if go in front of a bunch of investors. Also, the thing that's important about this is we want local investors to network with national investors so that there are deep pockets for Series B. Series B was identified as a gap in funding. So companies that could get Series A here, we don't want a Series B investment to fly in, swoop them up, and move them someplace else. So it's also to help. We want the relationships to help anchor the companies here.
Venture is most certainly a global sport, and making
Yes.
sure that we're all kind of playing on the same team and accelerating companies that valuations we all agree are part of the system right now.
Yeah.
That's incredibly helpful and really dynamic. So it sounds like it's in your research and view and experience, Relatively straightforward for startup to get through Series A in the local environment.
Yes. Yeah, for the right companies. I mean, we still see it's not across the board. We saw women backslide since COVID, and the percentage of national capital or venture capital that they've been able to access. We're trying to help reverse that trend and level the playing field on that front. So same with minorities. You know, we want everyone to come. We work with a lot of veterans and a lot of veteran companies, and we love our veterans. So
Absolutely.
we want to provide opportunities to everyone to come and access capital. So October 23rd and 24th, 2024 in Arlington for your calendar.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure to include the URL in the show notes. And you've been so generous with your time. You're running so many exciting programs for startups in Virginia and surrounds DC and Maryland. Is there any last words that you'd like to say to our listeners, something they should look forward to maybe in the year ahead, or a social feed they should follow to stay in touch with everything George Mason is doing on innovation?
Great. Yes, we're about to launch our new website. Of course, nobody's ever website is where they want it to be, but we're about to launch a new one. It's enterprise.gmu.edu,
Awesome.
which holds all the programs. And then, and you can see what we're up to in the regular feeds. And then acceleratedeals.org is the Accelerate Investor Event. And if you're an investor and you show up, we will probably put you to work to help judge and screen companies.
It's a very active investor experience, but you know what? Investors get bored if it's anything less than that. So that sounds like good fun. Paula, you've been amazing. Thank you for sharing the exciting programs you're running, and I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for doing this podcast and for shining a light on, you know, our favorite topic, which is startups.
You're welcome.